Path of Power. Chapter 2. Trying not to let his thoughts get the best of him, Marshall looks for distractions. How is that possible? WTF is going on here? Marshall had to ask himself. There was no possible way that he was seeing zombies. This wasn't a zombie apocalypse movie. So, how was this possible? Marshall just couldn't understand what was happening. He tried blaming it on people taking hard drugs or something similar. Try as he could, Marshall couldn't forget those eyes. Bloodshot and lifeless. If those people were not on drugs, they had to be zombies. Feeling mentally and somehow physically drained, Marshall had to sit down. Staring blankly at the ceiling, he went into a trance with no thoughts on his mind. More than 10 minutes passed before Marshall snapped out of it. A flood of thoughts invaded his mind. If this was a zombie apocalypse, how would I survive? What should I do next? Are my parents safe? What is happening with Vaughn? Am I going to die? What was that voice? Why is this happening? Why was I given a bat? The more questions Marshall asked himself, the more he found he knew nothing. That started a cycle of questioning with no answers. The thoughts almost paralyzed him. No, I have to do something, anything FCK, Marshall muttered to himself. Looking around his room for something to get his mind off his endless pointless questions. If he could not find answers to those questions, the least he could do was find something to keep him busy. His eyes landed on an open pack of bottled water. Water and food, he exclaimed. Having found a direction of attack, Marshall didn't waste any time taking action. In the room, he had 3 packs of bottled water. That included 2 unopened 40 packs of bottled water and 1 package that had only 28 bottles left. In total, he had 108 bottles of water to drink. If Marshall only drank 2 bottles of water per day, he would have had enough for 54 days. That would be for the best, since with every extra water he drinks, the more danger he would put himself in. Marshall would be able to go a couple of days without food. Even though he would be terribly weak, he would be alive. Without water, the same could not be presumed. Besides water, there wasn't any other food or drinks in his room. Taking one last peek out the window, Marshall saw even more zombies walking past. Shaking his head, he headed for the living room as quietly as possible. Marshall walked past the living room without paying much attention and went straight for the kitchen. Looking through the cabinets, he saw enough food that could possibly last for a week or 2 if he was being frugal. There was some junk food like chips, cookies, cereal, and sweets. He also found 3 packs of pasta, a bag of rice, some flour, condiments, and other small things. In the fridge, there was fresh fruit, milk, eggs, juice, vegetables, and some leftover food. The freezer had some frozen vegetables, ice, and frozen meat. All in all, there wasn't a lot of food, but at the same time, it wasn't too small either. As long as Marshall wasn't wasting the food, he would be fine. One thing that did make him worry was the power. If this happened to be a zombie apocalypse, he didn't know how long the power grid would operate. If the power did not last more than a day, all the perishable food in the fridge would be a waste. On the other hand, if it lasted longer, it would be great in the short term, but not knowing when it would last would always be a worry. Usually, Marshall would not go into Vaughn's room without him knowing, but the situation he was in wasn't normal, to say the least. Without being able to call him, Marshall was put in a slightly difficult position. That did not last long, since they had been friends since preschool, and as long as he was not stealing Vaughn's things, it would be fine. Walking out of the kitchen, Marshall headed for Vaughn's room. When he got there, he paused with his hand on the doorknob. He reassured himself that he was not invading Vaughn's privacy before he walked in. Vaughn's room was similar to his own. The only difference was that Vaughn's room was more personalized to his personality and his room wasn't. With this not being Marshall's first time in this room, he went to the closet to find what he was looking for. There he found 3 packs of water with 4 straggling bottles. With that, water wouldn't be too much of an issue. Marshall felt his mind clearing up from its haze. His tiredness due to abruptly waking up started to catch up to him. He couldn't help but yawn. Marshall knew that he still had some things to figure out, but with some of his worries alleviated, it was hard to fight off his drowsiness. Yawning, Marshall walked out of Vaughn's room and plopped on his bed. He fell asleep immediately afterward. Hours passed as Marshall fell asleep through the disaster that was happening outside of his room. From loud sirens of emergency vehicles, gunshots, and people screaming from misery, Marshall slept. He was too tired to wake up. When Marshall woke up, it was already past 5 in the afternoon. Feeling refreshed, he couldn't help but stretch and yawn. While smacking his lips, everything came back to him. Hurriedly trying to go to his window, he fell off the bed. It wasn't a loud fall, but he stopped moving instinctually as he waited briefly for something to happen. Nothing out of the ordinary happened. Releasing his breath, he carefully got off the floor and walked to the window. What Marshall saw shocked the hell out of him. There was an accident scene of at least 10 cars. It was mayhem with car parts all over the place. How did I sleep through this? Marshall was in genuine shock. All the noise that must have happened due to the accident should have woken him up. On a closer look, Marshall saw something that made his blood freeze. An unmoving person was on the road next to the wreckage. Marshall had the thought to check on the body to see if the person was alive. Marshall ran out of his room to check on the person. As he rounded the corner, he heard a noise outside the door. Thanks for watching. If you like this story, like and subscribe.